6 cosine squared x minus 11 cosine x equals -5. To solve this equation, it's of a quadratic format, so let's move all the terms to the left, set it equal to 0, and see if we can factor. This will give us 6 cosine squared x minus 11 cosine x plus 5 equals 0. So to factor it, let's try 6 cosine x and cosine x. And we need our final two terms to multiply to equal 5. But when the outsides and the insides are added, they have to add to be 11. So let's try minus 5 minus 1. So 6 cosine times cosine would give us 6 cosine squared. 6 times -1 would give us -6 cosine x. -5 cosine x plus -6 cosine x is -11. And then -5 times -1 is +5. So it did indeed factor to be 6 cosine x minus 5 times cosine of x minus 1 equals 0. So now let's set each one of those factors equal to 0. Cosine of x minus 5 equals 0, which means 6 cosine of x is equal to 5, and the cosine of x is equal to 5 over 6. And then cosine of x minus 1 equals 0 gives us the cosine of x equals 1. So for the second part of this equation, cosine of x equals 1, we can think back to our cosine graph, or we can think back to our unit circle, either one. If you want to think back to the unit circle, we have these ordered pairs, 1, 0, 0, 1, -1, 0, and 0, -1. And cosine was defined to be the x-coordinate. So where is the x-coordinate equal to 1? Well, that happens whenever x is 0. So that would be 0 degrees or 0 radians. So for this part of the problem, we get x is equal to 0. And then if we want to get all the angles that are coterminal to that, we would add plus 2n pi, where n is an integer. So this part of the equation is essentially 2n pi. Going back to the other part of the equation, cosine of x equals 5, 6. There's not a place on my unit circle where the x-coordinate is equal to 5, 6. There's also not a special right triangle where cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse, is equal to 5 over 6. So when this happens and I'm required to write an exact answer, I'm going to have to use my inverse cosine function. X is going to be equal to the arc cosine of 5, 6. And then we'll need to add plus 2n pi to get all the solutions. Recall that our arc cosine is defined between 0 and pi. And in solving cosine of x equals 5, 6, cosine is positive in the first quadrant, cosine is positive in the fourth quadrant. So when I look at my fourth quadrant, I would get an opposite signed answer for my cosine than one that is in the second quadrant between pi over 2 and pi. So my other answer would be the opposite of the arc cosine of 5, 6 plus 2n pi. Now you can, of course, use a calculator to come up with what these answers are approximately.